Well, good morning, good evening, or just plain good day to everyone on this webinar. My name is Peter Kohler. This webinar describes the value and benefits from the discipline of asset management. It's a series of webinars jointly put together and supported by the Asset Management Council within Australia, the Asset Leadership Network within the United States. The objective of these webinars is to support people generally and their organisations start and complete their asset management journey. The program it consists of a number of these webinars and that aims to collect stories of successful implementation of asset management and build a database of stories for the review, education and learning thereafter for the general population and people like ourselves, of course, as well. This webinar has a number of facilitators. You can see my name at the bottom. Michael Bonanero, who is from the Asset Leadership Network within the United States, is the Director of Communications. Sally Nugent, the CEO of Salient, will be joining us and hosting the discussion session at the end of this webinar to conclude this webinar. We have a fantastic program today. I don't normally use those words, but of course we have a bit of a preview on the content that fills out this webinar. This is program 5 and it contains 2 presentations. You can see the names of the people there. I'll be introducing them shortly, but they're from 2 varying industries, different industries. One about power transmission, that's from Andrew McAlpine. I'll be introducing him shortly. And Richard Dietz from the District of Columbia. He'll be introducing what he's going to be talking about as well. But we have 2 fantastically interesting presentations, both from a slightly different perspective, showing, and hopefully you'll agree, showing that there is significant value and the significant benefit to organisations from the application of the discipline of asset management. You can see on the bottom of the slide that this webinar is being broadcast not just within Australia, but also within the US through the Asset Leadership Network in the United States, and of course through the Asset Management Council here in Australia. I'd like to introduce to you Andrew now. Andrew, as you can see, is from his qualifications, is quite an experienced and professional engineer. He's from an asset management point of view. He's a certified asset manager assessor. That's the CAMA qualification. He's the asset systems and compliance manager for the network, and with a significant emphasis on the application of asset management. As you can see from the words below his image, he's an experienced manager with specialist skills in strategic asset management, asset standards as part of the asset management system, of course, risk and compliance as part of the asset management system, of course, and the implementation of 55001 management systems. He has over 30 years experience in the electricity utility industry, covering all aspects of the asset lifecycle. Andrew, unfortunately, has a couple of IT issues today, so he'll be joining us by phone, and upon his command, I'll be changing this slide pack. So I think now is an appropriate time to ask Andrew to, one, introduce himself and also deliver his presentation. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Apologies for not being able to be on the video, but you see my smiling face in the photo there. I don't think any introduction of me is necessary after that, so thanks very much, Peter. So happy to get on with the slide. I'd like to just start with a bit of an overview of Transgrid and who we are. So Transgrid are the operator of the electricity transmission system in New South Wales, and their headline numbers are there. So in terms of the number of customers and businesses we support, the size of our network. But essentially, if you imagine we're in the critical infrastructure game, our key role is transmitting electricity from large generators to other networks in the distribution sense, and supporting the large generators and large load connections in New South Wales. So on our next slide is the premise for our discussion today. So asset management has a cost. We know that. We know that establishing these systems embedding them and making them work, it does have a cost. And we were challenged by our CEO about 18 months ago with the statement in bold there. If we are exceeding the minimum ISO 55001 standards, which we are, what's the value of and return of our investment in asset management? So a very simple question to ask, but it wasn't necessarily an easy one to answer. So it generated some soul searching and thinking across the asset management team. And that's what we'd like to share with you today. The process that we went through, some of the conclusions that we came to with respect to that proposition, and just some general thoughts around that. So how do we do that? On the next slide, we've got the scope of what we did. So essentially, we had already obviously some work around our asset management maturity, and where across the aspects of ISO we were exceeding minimum requirements. Then we needed to think about value with respect to the business and the asset management objectives. So again, the CEO was interested in what return am I getting from this time, effort, and money that we're putting into the asset management system. An important question is, can we link maturity to performance? So asset management maturity is an indicator of good performance of the business, and that was an important question we had to answer. Then we needed to go through and actually look at our performance and then see if we could tie that back to the question that we were asked. So the first part of that was our asset management maturity assessment. So we've got a table on the next slide, and it's basically looking at our the certifiable areas, the 27 parts of clause of ISO, mapping them against our business objectives. So our strategic objectives are on the top line there. I do want to call out for this particular work in our asset management maturity assessment, we had some assistance from WSP and Jamie Maslin there. So that was helpful in this exercise. I'm presenting that as Transview's work, but this particular maturity assessment was done for us. But we have a number of maturity assessments to draw on over the years, and this is the one that we chose to use for this exercise. So essentially, if you have a look at that, we were able to identify our maturity and which areas that we can say safely that we're exceeding the minimum requirements set out in ISO. We have been a certified organisation to 55001 since 2014, I beg your pardon. And so obviously we also have been meeting those minimum requirements. So we're focusing around where there is extra value add, because obviously, again, that extra value add needs extra investment. So thinking about value on our next slide, looking at ISO 55002, we tried to look at the different forms of value, and we looked at value generation. So that's really in a shorter term. It's also focused around revenues, cost savings, efficiencies, other benefits to the organisation that are gathered through the use of the assets. And that's also would be focused, that's where some of our metrics or experience around our customers, so the cost of service to our customers, the performance that they're seeing and expecting, would come into this category of value generation, those benefits, revenues created from the use of the asset. Value determination is another interesting one. So that's looking at how is the value of the business being impacted, and that's obviously a longer term thing, and especially in our business. So an interesting anecdote, I guess, or an illustrative point was that we've been running a transmission network for 40 years. The last 17 of those we've been as a leased last 7 of those have been as a leased entity. So we moved from government hands to having a long-term lease. And during the process of that transaction, Transgrid internally decided there was value in actually getting certified 55,001. So while we were government owned, but before the lease transaction, we internally decided that it would be value in actually getting certified. And interestingly enough, the government during that transaction came to the view that at the end of the lease, they want the assets back. And so they actually made it a requirement of our license that we maintain that certification. And I believe I've heard their view was that they were confident that remaining certified to ISO for the business over the life of the lease would mean that at the end of the lease, those assets would be in a good shape to hand back to the government. So that was an interesting thing around value. The government very much had a very long-term view of the value of our assets, providing that critical service. And in fact, we came to the same view around certification, that would protect the long-term value. And so there we are. So that value determination, in our sense, is that continued value and health and capability of the assets. The third area that we looked at was around values. So obviously, there's a lot of cultures and behaviours that underpin asset management. Again, we'll talk about that later, a tricky one to measure perhaps. However, one of the other non-tangible things, I guess, is around the embedment of the asset management system. So in a number of reviews that we've had, we've been able to point to the fact that people, when we're talking across the business, they understand the asset management system. Those asset management principles are in their thinking. And so there's a lot of sort of measures or information we can draw on there to form a view around the culture in the business with respect to asset management. So one of the critical questions, and the next slide unpacks that, is can we link maturity to performance? So thinking about that for a moment, we could be a very highly performing company, but is that due to our asset management maturity? And so that's an important question to answer, because we could go through the exercise of looking at where we exceed the standard, looking at the performance of our company. But if that correlation is called into doubt, then that exercise would be an academic one. So again, we got some assistance with this one from WSP in looking at our maturity, looking at industry peers. In this case, they had data on the New Zealand electricity industry, and then looking at some measures across the industry between us and that sample of other peers in the industry. So again, I'll talk a little bit about data, but obviously these types of exercises can be challenging in terms of getting the data that you need to make these comparisons. But we were able, in this case, we believe, to show that there was some correlation between maturity and performance. Talk more a little bit about that later. So cutting to the chase then, what did we present to the executive? So what we did is we presented both some analysis and some figures and examples. And we were trying, again, their question was, what return did I get from the investment? We were trying to look at some of the benefits in the various categories of generation, determination, and values that we had achieved. And then we had to look at the costs that the business was spending and had invested in developing, maintaining the asset management system. So the people, the auditing, the external services, all of those costs associated with getting the asset management system to where it is and maintaining and improving that. So we were able to show considerable value for the business in terms of our CapEx and OpEx. Value in efficiencies, we were able to show, I haven't got those graphs, all the graphs here, but there was graphs around the customer performance and experience. Those things are valuable as well. We were able to show increases in the results in our cultural surveys. and also in our reputation and trust surveys externally from the consumer point of view. And again, we were able to try and put that into a figure, into some sort of return on investment, and demonstrate that to our CEO. So a few things that I wanted to discuss in the next slide there. So obviously there's those steps we went through, just some learnings and key highlights there. Obviously, the management of assets and the standard is all about value. So, it is a helpful exercise for us to go through and really try and define and map all those value statements across the business. Obviously, they're primarily driven by your asset management objectives, but using that 55,002 definition also helped us think a little bit broader around the categories of value to try and get the right set of value to consider in the question. I raised earlier that correlation versus causation. So you could be very mature, but is that really driving the business? That's probably going to be one of the hardest things for many businesses if they were to go through this exercise. We are a little bit fortunate in the electricity industry being a regulated monopoly. There is quite a lot of data that needs to be published about our performance versus our peers. But again, that question at the back of the mind could be hard to answer in many industries where some of that data is around your performance relative to others is difficult. So finding those appropriate sources of data is one of those key challenges in this type of exercise. And obviously, interpreting the outcomes, valuing that rate of return on investment, we're confident that we've got a positive and beneficial return. The precision of that number, of course, and the methodology used there is tricky to be precise about. Nonetheless, we were confident enough that we could show there was measurable value, and yes, I think that was a worthwhile exercise as well. So I guess to finish up, our final conclusions there. It's possible, on the next page, it's possible that you can use a structured approach to assess the value of asset management. And we did that, and I think it was helpful in communicating to top management in the business. That precise quantification of your return is difficult. Obviously, we've come up with a view, but there are a number of different ways of doing that and a number of different metrics that you could bring into that. So nonetheless, the key takeout there, we were able to satisfy our top management that our investment in asset management, so the money that we were spending maintaining the system, improving it, the investment we had in getting certified and maintaining that, we were able to satisfy top management that the investment in asset management was of value to the business. And I guess, as I said, it comes back to value. That's got to be a positive thing. Our business is all about what the assets can do for our consumers, and then what that does for the business. And ISO itself was obviously very, very heavily focused on the value. So it was pleasing in the end that we were able to undertake that work, present it to the top management, and I think that was both helpful and well received. So yeah, that's our story in that particular endeavour. And I think we're taking questions at the end, Peter, or are we taking them now?
No, Andrew, we'll take the questions after Richard's presentation shortly. Thank you.
Terrific.
Yep. So over to you, Mike, to introduce Richard.
Hello. I hope you can hear me.
We can't hear Mike. Mike, we can't hear you. Away you go, Richard. Why don't you start then? Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Richard Dietz. I work for the City of Washington, D.C. We are 7 years into our asset management journey and actually on our second asset management system. I'm not here to talk to you about our asset management system. Instead, I'm here to share ideas. I want to show you how we built our system. I want to show you some dashboards. We're heavy into condition, showing condition on assets. And I'm hoping that some of these ideas you'll like and you can adopt yourself. So I'm really hoping for this to be a learning experience and a sharing experience. So we're a city. We have buildings, we have fleet, we have roads and highways, we have equipment, art, and IT. And we've put all of that into an asset management system. So our asset management system and how we started our journey were objectives. And we have 4 objectives. What assets do we have that we need to be maintained? What is the quality of the assets we have? And how will we prioritize our capital needs? And most importantly, how much funding is available to address capital needs, because there's never enough funding to go around. So the scope of our asset management, i.e. what assets do I have that need to be maintained? So again, we're a city. So this diagram that you see, like to refer to it as a peacock chart, where there are 13 different data collection systems. So each of our, what we call an agency, runs specialized systems to manage their assets, which might be building, which might be fleet. They all do a fantastic job. So what we do is we tie into their systems and we bring in the data that we want. For example, for fleet, I'm interested in engine hours, engine age, maintenance, mileage. I use these things to calculate future expiration. And that's one of the things that we do. We predict the future. We use our asset management system to look at condition and predict future expirations so we could build 6-year capital asset plans. This is just a screenshot of the fleet. We have over 5,000 vehicles, around 5,700 vehicles in our fleet, like 91 ambulances. We have pumper trucks, ladder trucks, undercover vehicles. They're all in our system because we're tied into an asset management system that runs the fleet. I can pull in and look at the fleet that I want. But that's not all we do. What we do is we turn the fleet into condition, and I'm going to explain that in the next slide. This slide you're looking at right now are all of the assets that we're tracking. So there's 316,000 assets totaling $12.8 billion. And we count a building as one asset or a vehicle as one asset. Some people count those as multiple. This chart right here has all of our fleet, the entirety of our fleet on one screen. So you can see in the very far right, 893. That's 893 vehicles that are in poor status. They need to be replaced. And on the left, you'll see green, 1,198 vehicles. Those are brand new vehicles, very good and very good state of repair. And the ones in the middle are middle age. So I can actually get all of our assets visually onto one page. And if I want to, I can look in at any one of the assets, like the 893 in red. I could click on that bar and see all 893 vehicles that are about to expire. This is another way of looking at fleet. It's a condition chart. At the very bottom, you could see administrative ambulances, and we'll talk about ambulances. I know I have 91 ambulances. 9% of them are in good working order, 39% are in fair, 40% are poor, 12% in the red. They need to be replaced. So this is an example of looking at condition in a different way on individual vehicles by class type. Here's another example of condition. So again, we're heavy into condition. Condition tells us look at the state of the asset. In Washington, D.C., we break up our jurisdiction into wards. So this chart right here, what's showing me is roads and highways. The top left is Ward 1. There's 59 miles. You use kilometers. Sorry, I can't convert. But I know that there's, if you look at that Ward 1, 27 miles of are in poor condition. I know that means to me, 27 miles converts to $27 million. Every mile of road repair work is $1 million for us. So that's if we did complete replacement. So this is visualizing roads. What you just saw before was visualizing fleet. So we could visualize our assets. And we have 1,150 miles of road. I can get them all onto one chart. So that was a little bit about roads and highways, a little bit about fleet, a little bit about condition of assets. We could do the same with facilities, equipment, art, and IT. But I'm moving on. I'm moving on to a new topic, prioritization. Prioritization is really important to us, mostly because there's never enough money to go around. You want to make sure you get the highest priority projects done first, and the lowest priority projects, they could wait till the next time, unfortunately, because there's just not enough money to go around. You do not need an asset management system to do prioritization. You just need a group of people. The way asset management works for us is we have to bring in leaders to score our assets. I myself, being an asset manager, I cannot participate in the scoring. But what I do is I make the scoring easier for people. I make the teams, I bring the people in, and I tell them how we score, good, fair, and poor. We set up the rules, and then I allow them to score. This is a sample score sheet. So this is what they score. We have 300 capital projects every budget period. And I have this teams score every individual project. Each project has multiple score points. How ready is a project? Does it have stakeholder support? These are just points that are important to our mayor of our city. Scoring is just important to whoever is running your department, your city, your company. They're subjective and important to your mission. These are what are important to ours, but we found a way where we could score a roof repair project to that of a dog park. And we can get them all evenly on a 100-point system where they could all score the highest or the lowest equally. And that's important. So this, what is a fun, I think is fun for us, is the ability to track what we cannot do. So we score our projects. Imagine a chart, a bunch of projects. You draw the line in the middle. You can afford to do what you can above the line, and what you can't do below the line is what we call unmet need. We track what we can't do here in the city. It's equally important, I believe, as an asset manager to track what you can't do, as well as track what you can do. And that's one of the things I find very interesting is a lot of people don't track unmet need. In this chart that you're seeing right here, the very top line, IT projects and systems, that's $223 million of IT projects I could not buy. The next line, equipment and regulatory, that's 80 million of equipment that we could not do. The same for fleet, 186 million. The same for horizontal infrastructure, which is roads. Could not build 631 million in roads. And the biggest unmet category for us is facilities. There's 3,418 million worth of facility projects that we just could not afford to do. For example, there's a new jail we want to build and a new hospital. We're tracking those. We're tracking what we cannot do. Equally as important to track what you cannot do as what you can do. One of the big successes that we had with our IT system is it increased the borrowing power of our bond companies. They rated us. They give us an upgrade from AA to AAA, meaning we got an additional 100 million in borrowing power. So every year, annually, they increased our allotment to borrow by 100 million, and that was just by initiating an asset management plan. So that is a big success for us, and a big reason to start tracking what you can't do as well as what you can do. So that was a big win. Lessons learned over our 7-year journey. So we have been in asset management for 7 years, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and the lessons learned have been many, but these are ones that repeat quite often. Everyone's journey is going to be different, and there's never a best time to start. I hear that a lot. How do I start? How do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. If you're going to do an asset management journey, you need stakeholders. You're not going to survive on your own. You need to build a team. You need to be able to score your projects. So you have to involve people. Another thing that I learned is there's no finish line. When I took this position to be an asset manager, I didn't know there was never an end. For a job, there's always usually some target date, some end date, but there isn't a finish line. And I'm going to give you an example. Electrification of fleet. So our fleet, which I talked a little bit about briefly, is conventional gas burning engines. Now we're going to go green. All of our fleet will go green. So I have to change all my conditions, all my graphs for how fuel is used to now batteries. So what I thought I was done with fleet, I'm now going to be starting that journey all over again, but now with batteries. You got to welcome change and adapt to it. So you have to be flexible. That example of the fleet going electric is a great example of change. The COVID-19 that hit us was another great example of change. That changed our prioritization from facilities or fleet to more human services, getting shelters built, being able to deal with health emergencies, completely changed how we prioritize. Another lesson learned is talk to your peers. You have to talk to your peers. And validate your data continuously. Even though you plugged into your data and your data is pulling in, there are glitches that can happen. Your data could, for whatever reason, change, and you have to be on top of it. So you always have to just check your data every chance you get. That brings me to the end of this presentation. I really hope it helped you, and thank you for your time.
I think you can hear me now, can you, Richard?
I can.
So I would like to turn my introduction into an outroduction and say that DC government was in dire straits in the 1980s and 1990s. And as new leadership was put in place in the 2000s, there was a conscious effort to improve the image of the city and the way the city served its constituents. And there was quite an effort led through the office of the Chief Financial Officer. Richard's in that office. And they initiated a 2-year, $2 million program to set up all of their assets in a measurable manner. And it was that presentation of how they organized their assets that allowed Moody's and other bond ratings to give them that $100 million increase in their rating, which gave them $100 million of increased borrowing power. So that's a direct return on investment, a success that we can measure. But there were all kinds of other successes from just knowing what they had, where it was, and how it was being ordered. So Richard, one of the things I thought was interesting was you're moving the fleet. And since we have Andrew here, we might be able to talk a little bit about how going electric with vehicles is being managed on grids, because I'm sure part of you being transferring to electric fleet means you're going to have to be building charging stations and maybe increase power lines. And yeah, that's a question for Andrew, perhaps.
Okay. Thanks for that, Mike. And thank you very much to both Andrew and to Richard for their presentations. Some fascinating material in all of that. For the audience members, please, would you post your questions in the question option in your screen so that we can put them to the speakers and have them discussed for you. And actually, Andrew, I know you can't be visually seen, but I assume you're with us still?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool. Would you like to talk to Mike's point that he raised?
Well, I would like to talk to it, although 25 minutes is probably not enough. Yeah, look, I mean, there's big challenges for the industry. Look, in Australia, the key challenges are the change in the generation mix from our point of view. We're seeing a lot of coal-fired generation retire and a lot of renewables come on. Now that's at the transmission level, but that's also happening at the distribution level. So at the level that is providing power directly to the city, there is more embedded generation through solar and battery storage options. I think the big changes there will be the profile of the load. So, instead of the solar really drops the profile during the day, and there's all sorts of voltage and other issues associated with that. There's also the effects of storage and other things actually smoothing out the load. And so there is additional infrastructure, as you say, at that local level for charging and all those sorts of facilities. But there is also the bigger issues of balancing generation in different places, loads, and generation in places we didn't have a network previously, and smoothing voltage and controlling it over the whole network. So look, lots that could be said there, but there's some of the key challenges, and it's going to be an interesting time for all of us in that space.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. I actually had a question of Richard, if I may ask, because you've got, and I think it's great that you track your unmet needs, and I would think that's a very important thing for many organisations to do. I wondered, with so many unmet needs, what kind of technological improvements do you think might help you actually be able to bring forward some and start to meet some of those needs? I mean, where are the gaps in asset management that are not delivering potentially?
So we know specifically the way we track a program, IT, if the question was directed for IT, every capital project every IT project becomes a capital project. That capital project is tied to a description. We know exactly what that is. It could be, new ticketing system for Department of Motor Vehicles. It could be new software for maybe human services. So every IT project, every IT item becomes a capital project. That capital project has a description. We track that. So once that's on the radar and it doesn't get funded, it stays on the radar. So for the next budget period, it's still there. Hopefully it'll get satisfied. If it doesn't, it'll stay on the radar until the next budget period. So we have our asset management system tracks all of these individual capital projects and we keep it going forward, it will increase in cost. Next year is usually CPI more, whatever it is, CPI more, we budget for it. So we're tracking it. All we need is additional money, more funding to be able to solve the problem. So we don't need any additional IT to track anything. We have that in place. It's just now keeping it on the radar. Hopefully we could solve it. And it really depends upon the prioritization. So it all gets back to not enough money being around. And I'm going to give you for example, we call them agencies. We have 100 agencies in the city. They participate in the capital projects. They ask for $14 billion. We only have 8 billion every year. So that's a lot of no's. That's all the no's that we're tracking, hundreds of capital projects. They're all on the radar. We know what they are. They're from IT, art, buildings, and we are on track to satisfy all of those unmet needs by 2032. So we have a way and a system to meet all those needs. It's just tracking them for us right now.
Okay, thank you. I just go to a question from Mark Jensen, and this is for both Richard and Andrew. How much effort has been put into improving data as an asset? That's on top of improving physical assets.
So how much effort does it take to manage your data?
No, how much effort's been put into improving data management as an asset? So data as an asset, right? Because all your data is an asset in and of itself. Yep. So how much improvement has been putting into improving? So let me rephrase.
Yes.
How much effort has been put into improving your data assets?
How much effort is put into improving your data of your assets?
No.
Yes.
No, the data as an asset. So actually the data.
Yeah, data is an asset. I get it. It is. And a lot of effort goes into managing that data. So what we do, and it's really the big stick kind of approach, where if your data, we have to rely on the agency's data. The agencies for us do a great job of managing their data in their systems. We pull their data in and we make decisions based upon that data. If that data that they're managing is not good, then that's going to impact how much money they get. So for example, if they say they have 100 fleet vehicles, their data says they have 100 fleet vehicles, that's where they need to be. They don't need any more vehicles. That's an oversimplification. So if their data says they're at the right amount, but maybe that's not true. Maybe they needed some of those vehicles were expired and they did not get them off of their data set. That's incorrect data on their part. It impacts the capital decisions we make. That's what we call the big stick. So they have to keep an accurate data set for us to make our data decisions. It never ends. It's always ongoing. We're always managing data. The agencies are always managing data. It's a whole part of the journey that just never ends.
I would like to add something. We've been privileged to have DC government present to the Asset Leadership Network because they are constantly improving what they're doing. And from past presentations, I know that in order to get those 100 agencies to provide the data in the way that it was needed, they very simply said, give us data in the way we need it or you don't get your money. And that established a culture of asset management very quickly. These scenarios where people saying, hey, we've got a project starting and we don't have our money. And they held up their notice that said, you don't get money until you give us data in the way that we need it. And the culture of asset management at DC government has made it one of the best municipalities in the United States in terms of asset management, excuse me.
Okay, thanks, Richard and Mike. Andrew, did you want to add anything to that question? data as an asset?
Yeah, sure. So definitely a critical asset. And look, we've taken the approach, we try and treat it like any other asset. In fact, we have our own asset information strategy, which is not about the systems, it's actually about the asset information. And I guess the approach that we've taken is look at exactly the same as an asset, the criticality of that data and the condition of that data, in the same principle. So if we think about the criticality, obviously we've got key decisions we need to make, and those need models, and those need data, which then rely on specific asset information. So actually going through the process of looking at what are those key decisions, and then what is the critical data, then what's the health of that data, means that we have a rolling program of initiatives that are targeted at the high risk areas or the high criticality areas of improving the data. So I guess a lot of effort goes in, but my only caveat there is it's very much targeted at the key risks and decisions that we're managing and making, and what data is supporting that, and then what level of confidence and we have in the accuracy and timeliness availability of that data, then driving any specific initiatives to improve data.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Andrew. It coming into my mind is Donald Rumsfeld's comment ages back, we don't know what we don't know, and that's one of the issues with data, isn't it? One has a lot of data, but what is it that you're actually going to need in the future, and will you know if you've actually measured it appropriately? Anyway, we have another question from Trong Van Nguyen. He's asking, how do you bring senior leadership, or how have you brought senior leadership on your journeys? And this will be a question for both Andrew and Richard. Who championed that process, and was there a eureka moment? And just in case eureka doesn't make sense for the US audience, the aha moment would be eureka, which allowed...
We know eureka.
Okay, cool. So senior leadership on the journey to support the asset management movement. Did you have a champion, and what led to any eureka moment and in your journeys?
I'll go first, if that's okay. So we were fortunate in the sense that our chief financial officer, Jeff DeWitt, the director at the time, was the one that wanted to stand up our platform. So we had a champion right from the very beginning, and that was very, very crucial, because we've been challenged a lot along our journey, and not having a leader behind you, because you're making change, right? We're stirring up the pot to stay. We're making people change their mindset, change their decision making. And I'll give you for example, the way Fleet was requested in the past was, I want $17 million every year to buy, and that's how much the ask was, to buy ambulances, fire trucks, ladder trucks. And we said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do it from a bottom-up approach. We're going to build our capital replacements by saying what is going to expire. It may not be 17 million, it might be more, it might be less. And that was challenged by the fire department, by the police department. And if I did not have my champion, if I did not have Jeff DeWitt behind me, it would not have worked. So you do need a champion, and you also need to make teams. As an asset manager, you really can't be involved on any decision making, but you do need someone to stand behind you to help give you support. You do need to make teams and surround yourself with people that are the right people, that are the right stakeholders to help you on this journey. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, look, I think I'd just add, absolutely important part of the journey is influencing the top management and the board. In our business, we have a clear owner of asset management at the executive level. That's obviously a very helpful thing, but someone who owns and is accountable for the asset management system and the performance of the assets in all forms, their risk, their actual outage rates, failure rates, costs, all of that is in one senior executive who then becomes our champion. It's like asset management's a never-ending thing in terms of engaging with senior leaders, because as they come and go, and as a new CEO comes in or a new executive, you've got to go through that process. I guess I don't know about eureka moments, but I think one of the key things for our business in terms of raising asset management awareness at that level is the impact on having a strong asset management system and certifications and maturity on our insurances. So when we have discussions with our insurers, the general manager of asset management actually personally goes to that, because the insurers are, in our context, are extremely interested in bushfire risk. And really that asset management is what you need to point to, and the strong asset management system is what you point to actually engage and get the best value for that insurance. And I guess the other one is that it's very much on the minds of all of our creditors and lenders that they ask questions and they're interested in the asset management system. So I think key to engaging that board and top level is really what is the asset management system providing for the consumers, of course, or the customers, but also what's it providing, what benefit is it giving them in terms of these other corporate level aspects that they need to achieve. And so I think that's the focus in that upward communication. What are they really getting out of our approach to asset management?
Yeah, okay. Thanks to both of you for those comments. I reflect that, in fact, both of you are in organisations that have supported asset management for a considerable period of time, in fact, compared to many other organisations. And so would each of you think that, in fact, there's been a reasonable degree of support for asset management for some period of time?
I think so. In our organisation, I mean, it does, as all these things, wax and wane a little, but I think ultimately the understanding that the assets are absolutely critical to all the revenue the business earns and all of 99% of the risks it faces. I think that awareness is strong in the organisation at all levels, and I think that at the end of the day, that's the key part of the culture that you're driving for from an asset management perspective.
Yeah, and the longer you do it, the more stronger your program will become. And I'll give you for example, the not enough money to go around, what project gets completed, what project does not. Scoring really helps carry that message. And it helps the people in our departments understand why their project was not funded. COVID-19, for example, put a lot of facility projects that typically were higher in priority at the back of the list, and human service projects went up. And the reason why people understood that more was the scoring. So what I'm finding is the momentum within our own city on asset management is getting stronger from within once they realize the benefits and how it can help them with decision making and defending the decisions they make. Why something wasn't done was because something else had a higher priority. So it actually really helps, and it goes really deep. If your capital project does not get approved, well, that then gives you justification to ask for more operating budget. Because they didn't get the money to replace that vehicle or do what they wanted to do, they now need to maintain that older item, which means they need additional operating expense. The more people understand, the more the light bulb goes off in their head, the more believers I get. It just time makes stronger believers. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Thanks, Richard. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mike. Yes, please.
From the ALN perspective, DC government had already instituted their asset management system before they learned about us, and we introduced them to ISO 55000. DC government was the site of our first ALN A55K professional certification program, which teaches about ISO 55001 and 2 and how it might be implemented. So there were a number of people from DC government participating in that. And that's part of that continuous improvement that Richard says, and the culture is constantly evolving. So I wonder, Andrew, what kind of training is provided at TransGrid to help with the ISO 55001 compliance?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Look, so I guess we try and target our training and awareness at multiple levels. So at the end of the day, we take the view that anyone coming into the organisation needs some familiarity with the basic concepts of asset management. So, we don't obviously talk about the standard in depth and that, but we do have an induction, online induction. It goes for about 20 or 30 minutes that all new starters are expected to do. With just those principles of asset management. We are an asset management intensive organisation, and this is what good asset management looks like. I guess it's from there that in the particular business units, we have a deeper dive for people doing asset-facing activities day to day. Then we would need to rely on our asset management capability framework, which would look at the specific roles across the business. So my role, for example, or my team or my manager. And then, we've mapped that against asset management competencies and capabilities using one of the frameworks around. And then we use that in the development planning. So each year, as people doing their development plan for next year, they'll look at what asset management capability their role needs ideally, and then with their manager where the gaps are, and then we have sort of pointers and training, recognised training courses or on the job or whatever it is that get developed to close those gaps. So I guess it's trying to, at the different levels of knowledge that people need, try to make something available.
Okay. Thanks for that, Andrew. I've actually got another question, but since we're close on the hour, I'm going to formally close the session, as we often do, and then those that want to continue the discussion can stay online. So I'd just like to say to both Richard and Andrew, on behalf of the audience, thank you very much. Some of the comments from the audience include great opportunity to learn and understand the implementation journey, and great answers from both Australia and the US, really inspiring. So there's some of the comments that have come from the audience with appreciation. And also thank you very much to the audience for participating, and also to Heidi, who's working behind the scenes supporting the whole process. So yeah, thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, my co-facilitators. Thank you to our audience and to the Asset Management Council also. Okay, so I don't know, Peter, I don't know if you've got any questions, but I actually wanted to ask Andrew. I really enjoyed your discussion about definition of value, defining value. And I think it's a really interesting conversation that we should probably have more broadly in the asset management community, because value can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I wonder, do you think that would be a good idea within the community to talk about what value means and how we might describe it? I like the way you actually had the different types of value, meaning different things to make it clearer, and also wondered whether you had included things like value delivered, such as safety and occupational health, because I know that asset management often improves those things, and that is a value delivered, but it's not often identified.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. So I mean, value is, as I said, and you said, underpins everything. But then, if you get asked to point to what value is, it can be a bit tricky. So look, I think that it's definitely worth a broader conversation in the community. I mean, value is going to be different for everyone, but I guess some of the ways of thinking about it or thinking through it are probably helpful in thinking, in talking about. So how do you, establish value? Which stakeholders do you involve? Which, what sort of lenses can you look at it? I think that's a kind of helpful discussion. What frameworks can you use to evaluate value in your own organisation? I think that would be sort of very helpful discussions for the community. In terms of safety, it's definitely in there. So I guess we would view the direct outputs of the asset management system being everything to do with asset safety. So what I mean by that is safety hazards that are created through the asset failing in some dangerous way, or safety hazards that exist because the asset's just there. So, in our case, obviously electricity is there because the asset is there. So we would include those in our value, in our objectives, but also in the assessment of value. Less so, and not because they're less important, but because they're driven more by our safety management system, but less so some of the work practices aspects of safety. So, driving or working at heights or things like that, they're critically important as well, but we tend to say, look, that's more for the health and safety management system to look at those work practices where the safety outcome is not directly related to the asset being in good condition or not failing safely or not being designed correctly, if that makes sense. But definitely safety is a key metric we did consider in that analysis, but around asset safety, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got fundamentally so many different systems: occupational health and safety, finance, and asset management, actually working together. But you often don't know where the result lies or the data.
Correct, and the way that we've tried to get around that is by having that principal risk view that essentially everything to do with the asset failing or the asset being there and being a hazard is accountable. The executive manager is accountable for asset management, is accountable for that, including public safety. So people doing silly things around our assets or unintentionally coming too close. All that is within the executive responsible for asset management, but then everything to do with how the workforce does their job. The trained workforce is all within another executive in the business, and that sort of maps with the management system boundaries.
Okay, cool. Thank you,
Richard.
For that.
Richard, the idea of value must be a very hot discussion when you get your groups together to do scoring. Each of those groups must have different ideas of value, but your system smooths out each different group's idea of what's valuable.
So the new word is value stacking. Okay, there is no one value. It's value stacking. Some value to one person might be readiness, reduce operating costs. Value to another person might be lowering capital expenditures, might be something completely different. So it's value stacking. That's how you now value an asset, not just by one measure, but by multiple.
It really does depend at the end of the day on who the stakeholders are, isn't it? Here, I mean, the value is in the eye of the beholder. So generally the beholder of all these are the stakeholders. So we can all talk about value, but the real people who determine the value are the people that are looking from the outside in, and they're the stakeholders. And so. And so if we don't do that, then we're missing the cue as well by a long way. Missing the ball with the cue by a long way. Yeah. that opens up another interesting conversation or two as well.
It
Yeah.
does.
Okay, I'm going to say, are there any final comments from Mike or Peter as we close this session out?
Well, again, I'd like to thank Richard and Andrew. And Andrew, in addition to having ongoing discussions about value, look for an email about an ongoing discussion about insurance. I think that's a really important thing, and I'd like to talk with you more about that.
Yeah, sure.
And Richard,
fact,
thanks again. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. That was me. It was me making a comment.
Oh.
We do have a number of the AIM Council does have a number of interesting stories in relation to asset management and insurance and the relationship. And in fact, when you talk about asset management delivering a higher level of confidence, a higher level of insurance, one of the things that happens is your insurance lowers, should lower, right? Because your risks are lower. So there's got to be a sort of yin and yang of that. And there's a number of stories about that within the asset management community of how asset management delivers to the insurance companies a known level of risk. Therefore, if it's known and managed, then your level of insurance will theoretically drop. Anyway, there's a number of instances where that has actually occurred. That's been well documented. So we have those stories to share at one point or another in the future of this series as well. Yeah. But apart from that, from my perspective, to Andrew and Richard, many thanks. It's part of the challenge of doing your stuff well is that you end up having to talk about it to a lot of other people, but that enables you to reflect upon your journey as well. So it's actually good from your perspective as well as ours to hear all of that. So, but on behalf of the Asset Management Council, of course, the ALN, to both Andrew and Richard, well done. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'm sure we've got a few more people involved now, emotionally as well as technically in the subject of asset management as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And to everyone left on this call, thank you very much for participating, and for all the team here who've put in a bit of effort to make all this happen. Well done too. And particularly, as Sally said before, to the team that's unseen, Heidi and the team in Melbourne, putting all this together. Thank you very much indeed as well. And for your patience, Heidi. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.